I didn't want to be here anymore. I didn't want to hurt anymore. What I came to realize is it's not that I wanted to take my life. It's not that I didn't want to live. I just didn't want to live the life I was living. I spent most of my life thinking I was alone and that nobody was going to love me and that I didn't matter. I had blinders on. The reason I felt alone was because my focus, my blinders were just focusing me on the few people that I wanted to see me, the people I wanted love and affection from, and like my mother, the man I was married to. It's very hard, but you have to take the blinders off.
Hey guys, it is Alison. I am the host of your show, Alison Answers Mission Awake. I cannot wait to sit down with you today and go over how we are going to crush the mediocrity in your life that has been plaguing our society since the beginning of time. I cannot wait to have a real deal conversation that includes intelligence, fun, excitement, and real actionable steps to make a real difference in the life that you're living now and making it into something you can be damn proud of and excited to live. Sit down, put on your damn seatbelt, and get ready for the ride of your life. Hey guys, how are you today? I have a great guest on. We were supposed to do it live at 12 o'clock today, but we had some major technical glitches, so I apologize to both Dana Diaz's audience and my own. We will be putting this on a live broadcast, raw, and also putting it on all the podcast platforms. But let me tell you about my guest. Dana Diaz is a best-selling author, speaker, podcaster, and abuse recovery coach. Her memoir, trilogy, Gasping for Air, Choking on Shame, and Rising from the Ashes was inspired by her lifelong experience with abuse and domestic violence and the healing journey she was led on as a result. Dana has been featured on nearly 300 podcasts worldwide. She speaks to live groups and in online summits centered around women's empowerment and wellness. And she also co-leads a healing workshop for women. I've had Dana on the podcast before, and the reason I asked her to collaborate on a live with me were for two reasons. One is to break the power of the myth of narcissism, that people continue to label other people narcissistic just because they show some traits of narcissism. And I think it's important for people to know what it is really like for people who are involved, living with, or sharing children with someone who is a true narcissist. And it is my pleasure to help anyone out there who's struggling with any kind of an emotionally hostage situation with a narcissist and the feeling that you'll never get out. My hope is that you will listen to this and be inspired by, healed by Dana's journey, and by demystifying or changing the way we look at narcissism. It's as such a, easily thrown around term. It actually helps people who are actually in dangerous situations. But if it's used loosely, then it loses the power of what a narcissist is really capable of and how much they could really reprogram a human being's mind if they're in a connected relationship. So please listen in. You're going to find some really incredible tools here, and you'll actually hear a riveting story from an incredible woman who's overcome and now triumphs. So without any further ado, Dana Diaz. Hey guys, how are you today? It is Alison from Alison Answers and Lager Counseling Services. And as I mentioned, I have this wonderful woman, Dana, here to share her experience, strength, and hope, and how she was able to literally escape and triumph. That would be the way I would describe you, that from tragedy to triumph. I would like to ask you just to tell the audience your experience, your story, and then how you actually overcame, where you were. And I'm going to say one thing, so I want to just pre-frame this for the listeners. What I really, really believe is that we have in our society caused some difficulty by understanding psychology from a layman's perspective. And I think it's really good that all of us, people who are not in the field are understanding aspects of it, but a really big issue is that a lot of people are talking about narcissism as if, just if their boyfriend or girlfriend was selfish, or like we all can be selfish, or if they didn't show emotion regarding them, in the moment. So just would ask that you would really listen to what it is to be in kind of in an emotionally hostage situation with a person who's a true narcissist, and ways for anyone who could be listening that you can get out. And it doesn't mean that it has to be in this second. You can build yourself up into a person who's able to get out. And I just would love Dana to comment on that and hear everything that she has to say.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me. I adore you, and I am just so happy to have a conversation with you again. We have podcasted previously, so this is amazing. But I actually would like to start with just what narcissism is, because I think you bring up a good point, is that, as we were just talking about before we started recording, is that narcissism is this word that people use. It's like calling somebody a jerk anymore, but it's used so flippantly that people don't understand that when I'm talking about narcissistic abuse, what does that mean? Because the reality of it is actually very grave, very serious for those of us who have experienced, that degree of it. So I'll give a very general idea of what narcissism is. It's essentially when somebody's ego needs to feel superior. It needs to be fed, so to speak, so that they feel better about themselves. Oftentimes it's because of a deep-seated insecurity. So they will use control and manipulation and all these other things to feel more, to feel grandiose, they say. Mm-hmm. But this doesn't always look like the overt narcissistic people that we typically see, which, these are the people that you're going to see on social media that have the flashy cars and the clothes and the abs and the lashes and the whatever. They need to be seen, and they are like, here I am, I'm fabulous. And it is what it is. It's annoying, of course. But when I talk about narcissism, there is a spectrum. And well, on the other end of that are people, and sometimes they're not overt. Sometimes they're very quiet and seem humble and almost like, you pity them. You feel bad for them. But this is the side of narcissism where you see domestic violence. You see a quarter of the male U.S. prison population. And I'm not picking on men, because women can be narcissistic. Believe me, they have superpowers in the area of narcissism that men don't have. But I always say it's kind of like brain tumors, if people want to think about it simplistically. You can have a benign tumor that's just there. Those are the people with the abs and the lashes that you're like, okay, they really do look as good as they think they do. So you can hate them or not, but that's up to you. They're not bothering anybody. Or you can have a malignant tumor that is going to cause you problems. It might affect your health. It'll affect your life, and it needs to be cut out before it kills you. That's basically what we're dealing with, and then every area in between. So going back to my personal story, the brief version is I was born to an unwed teenage mother that apparently didn't want any children because she had her tubes tied immediately after my birth. And yes, they did that in the 70s. You didn't have to wait to a certain age. But she married a man when I was 7 years old. You want to talk about a narcissist, king of all narcissists. He didn't want me any more than my mother did. The abuse was very real, mostly verbal, a lot of physical. But to give people an idea, I grew up from the time I was about, I would say 5 years old on. I would almost daily hear, "You're a burden. Nobody ever wanted you." He'd tell me the toast I was eating for breakfast would make me fat and that my hips would get wide like a middle-aged woman and nobody would ever want me. By the time I was 10, he was calling me a whore for wearing a leotard and tights to dance class. I was never going to be enough. Nothing I did was ever, appreciated. Achievements were dismissed. And, followed with the physical abuse, and a mother who literally would look away, even if she was a few feet away, of me screaming for her to help me. It was not a happy childhood by any means. So I was intent on getting out of that house at 18. I was in college. I studied journalism and psychology. Nobody was ever going to abuse me ever again, but I was going to help other kids get out of that situation because you're so helpless and powerless when you're a child.
Yes.
Because even when child services was involved, they didn't believe me. They believed, my mother and stepfather, who put on a very good act, that I was difficult and I was defiant and I was the one who was being physically abusive to them. These narcissists like to turn things around. But unfortunately, I ended up falling for, ironically, a gentleman he wasn't a gentleman. That's the problem. But a young man who he was a lot of things, but it was basically a repeat of my childhood is what happened. It just came at me a little differently. It's that covert narcissism that I didn't recognize because I just didn't experience it the same as I had with my mother and stepfather. 25 years I spent with this man, waiting, hoping, thinking time, would heal his wounds and mine, thinking maybe he'd mature, thinking things would be better after we had a baby, thinking things would chill out. Eventually I could, have a loving relationship. And by the end of that 25 years, he had planned to kill me, made a couple attempts, brought weapons into the situation, even after the divorce. And what compelled me to write my first book was a journal that I kept hidden under the couch cushion in the basement, because during COVID, just a couple weeks after I had met with the sixth attorney that I'd met with over the years, I was ready to file for divorce, and we went into the shelter in place. So I was stuck in the house with him, and I was actually terrified that he would indeed take my life. So I was keeping a record about what was going on. And that's eventually what I developed into my first book, which sadly has resonated with a lot of women. And
Yes.
I think what people need to understand, I'm going to throw out two very quick statistics because I want people to understand that this isn't just some random rare thing that happens. The most recent statistic is that 1 out of every 3 women in the entire world experience intimate partner abuse by a current or former intimate partner. And 1 woman dies every 10 minutes as a result. Every 10 minutes. And that should shock people. And that should make people wake up, because you and I are here. We're 2 women. If there was a third woman here, one of us has experienced it. Obviously, I'm the one in this situation, but everybody has a mother, a sister, a daughter, a niece, a cousin, a friend. Go to work. How many women are there? How many women are experiencing this and you don't see it? It's happening right under our nose.
Yes. There's a couple of things that you brought up that I just want to dive into a little bit, because we regularly here at Lager Counseling Services have parents bring in children who are impossible.
Yeah.
And then the child will explain, to us or whoever about what's really happening at home. We believe them, but no one really does. And the mindset, one of the mindsets that I would like to somehow break is this concept that anyone who's listening, if you have a child, or if you hear people talk about blaming their child for being bad and they describe them in that way, I can tell you that every one of the children that come in here, no matter what their age, no matter what their behavior is, we call them the identified patient. Because very often parents are unwilling to look at themselves in the way that they're parenting, and that the children are just imprinting them and their strong reactions. They were not born with that. So I just want to highlight that too, because I think those are those little victims that they become the problem. They go into the mental institutions. We do everything to keep them out, because that is more abuse there. So it's, hospitalizations because the parents can't take it. And, and a lot of these kids end up being suicidal because they see no hope. So I throw that out there because it hit, when I hear you tell your story, Dana, it hurts, especially hearing that little girl, and then I see you, this bright light, and I want to hear more about your experience also with your marriage, but also as that little girl, I know what it's like for me and like the programming that happens between 0 and 7 years old. You're in a theta brainwave. The program is being developed, and I know that you have to overcome that program in order to thrive, survive. So how did you do that? Or how are you? I'm sure you're doing it, right?
I think it's a lifelong journey, but
Yeah.
what happens is we get caught up in life. I was going to college, I was getting married, then it's buying a house and having a baby. We're going to work every day. And, we're all just trying to get through the daily stuff. Like, when do we have time to stop and say, oh, I have that childhood baggage to deal with? I mean, a lot of people go to maybe a talk therapist, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I always tell people you can't just go and talk to somebody at 2 p.m. every Thursday and go home and go back to your life and think everything's going to be okay. It is an active, very awful and soul-crushing experience to go through healing. I mean, honestly, I have come so far, and I'm so proud of myself. I've had all the right people, help me along the way. But it's funny, even a few days ago, I had a revelation, something that has been a trigger for years that has caused the disruption between me and my current husband. And it's like I had an aha moment, and I'm 49. My gosh, you would think that I would have figured everything out by now. But even I just realized something, and it's good because, I still have the trigger happening, but now it's like a fly that's buzzing around that you can just like shoo away. Like, yeah, I know what that is. Like, just leave me alone. We're not doing that anymore. But it does take, you have to be very self-aware. You have to be very willing and open to going back to those awful places that, you usually want to just leave back there and forget about. But I do recommend it. And I think that's why, and I'm sure you experience it too, a lot of people really don't, delve into this very deeply until later in life. Like, my son is 22. He's he owns his own house. He's not here. I have space physically, emotionally, life-wise, where I can do that work. And I have been doing that work. So it's wonderful, but not everybody has that earlier in life because we're just going through the stuff. But I do want to also address, and I'm just throwing this out there because you were talking about the childhood experience, that little girl, the thing is that as a little girl, I went to my little friends' houses to play, or the neighbors' kids. I saw how they didn't have to put their hair over their face to hide bruises. I saw that they didn't have to be like me and wear long sleeves and turtlenecks and in the summertime in 100-degree weather to hide hand marks and things like that. But one thing, my second book is actually about my childhood, and it's choking on shame, the scapegoat child in a narcissistic family, because I was the scapegoat. My mother was terribly abused. Her father was a narcissistic, violent drunk, and my grandma didn't know what to do with him. My stepfather was also abused, actually ended up in the foster system because both his parents abandoned him and his brothers and sisters. So I understand the reasoning, but it does not excuse their choice to do that to me, especially when they had a baby, my brother, that they did not treat the way they treated me. So it was certainly a very different experience. But, something you said, kind of crushed my heart, and you may not even know this about me, but I do talk about it in my book, is my mother and stepfather did have me institutionalized when I was 16 years old, and I hadn't done anything wrong. In fact, my mother, and trigger warning here if somebody's uncomfortable, but my mother and stepfather actually beat me because I I very loudly, and I cussed at them, and I said, why the F don't you care about me? Because I was so frustrated, because I was struggling with, why do I even exist? Why am I even here? Do I even want to be alive anymore? And I ended up with my mother's hands around my neck until I blacked out and could figure out how to hurt her enough to get her hands off of me. And then I ended up being institutionalized, even though I was the victim. And even just to be institutionalized, everybody there knew that there was nothing wrong with me. I wasn't on any medications. I had no diagnoses. And one of the hardest things when I reread that second book, because I do once in a while, because it helps me to go through the experiences again. But it's interesting that when the insurance ran out and I was released, I didn't even want to leave there because the people there saw me, they valued me, they liked me. They saw my potential. They saw how smart I was and how talented I was. And it's sad to say I wanted to stay locked in an institution instead of going home with my mother. And that tells you everything you need to know about my childhood.
Yes. It really is crushing to hear. And I really appreciate this conversation because I'm going to share it with all my therapists that work with us, because they face this kind of thing, and they are trying to figure out what to do, how to actually rescue these children. Because the parents, if somebody is narcissistic or abusive, and if they're not willing to own or see any of their part, and then it doesn't matter if you report it, because then it could make it worse for the child. And I feel so passionate about that. They don't have a shot. I mean, they have a shot. That's not true. But when they're living there, we have to just help them be able to overcome while they're living there. Right. But the thing I wanted to say about you and your, this, I guess, foundational, but programmed experience, like this little girl, and you probably even say this in your book, but I'm going to say it out loud just as a therapist. That little girl, you had to split off from that emotion, because if you didn't, you couldn't have survived there. Because, if you were crying or reacting in a way that not that you weren't normal, but a baby would experience this unbelievable trauma and betrayal, you have to quickly go into survival mode and, chronic stress and fight or flight. So what we try to help people do is that we ask them to almost like integrate their relationship with their younger self, so that, return to them. And I do this thing on a screen. I'm curious what you think about it. I just will tell people, just let's look at that one situation on a big screen over there on the wall, and I'll say, and then how about you and I walk up to that moment? Let's say when your mom had her hands around your throat, that, me, the therapist, and the the adult, just look in on it. And then just, you just in your mind's eye, you're seeing it, and you say, how do you feel about that child? And sometimes people will say, I hate her. Why doesn't she stop crying? This is just an example, right? But a lot of times in therapy, this is what I want to just kind of highlight. A lot of times in therapy, a therapist will encourage that person to say, no, love her, but they're skipping a step, because it's possible that they learned to not like themselves, or to think it's their fault, or whatever all that is. And if you don't address it in truth, some healing could be skipped, because your body knows. So the integration is from the two telling the truth. So then I ask them, if you could go in there now, I ask them, what do you think I feel toward that child? And then it switches them to think, oh, like you feel sad, or you actually love that child, or whatever they say. Then I say, if you could go into that scene in your mind, it's kind of like neuro-linguistic programming. If you could go into that scene, could you imagine yourself walking in as the adult? What would you do right now? And something happens to them, because then that empowered part visually, and it's almost like if you visualize something, it's as if it's happening, because our body is a record of memory, right?
Yeah.
So even though you know that you were nearly being killed, if as an adult you go in and you get the hands off the child, you care for the child, take the child out, whatever it is that you do, now that, even though you know that isn't the actual event, your brain processes that, and it brings some sort of healing. It is the oddest thing, but it actually works. So it's like rewiring that memory.
Exactly.
Yes.
And that's exactly it is, and forgive me, but the rewiring, because I think that people, again, I go back to people just think you talk to somebody or they, oh, do you have somebody to talk to? Do you go to therapy? It's so much more than that, because I think you do have to understand that. And you said it earlier, and most people don't even know this, that by the age of 7, you're pretty much set on what you believe about yourself, what you believe about roles in life, your, sense of belonging, your family, society at large. It's a very young age. And so you go through your life, even if you don't agree with those things, you go through your life based on those core beliefs about you, family, society, your roles, all that. And we do have to rewire. The way I always tell people, it's like when you're doing, I call it unwiring or untangling the wires, but I think in my mind, you're going along a path and then something happens. It's never about the present moment. It's something that triggers something that happened back there. But you come along a crossroads where, okay, you're about to run down that path you normally run down, which is that spiral down the rabbit hole. Sometimes I just flailed myself down the hole and just said, forget it. Like, let's just go. But you have to go down that other path. You have to actually stop and say, okay, and this is where self-awareness comes in. And you have to stop and say, okay, I know how this is going to go.
Yes.
This really triggered me. I'm going to spend the next 3 days crying in bed, sleeping, dead to the world. I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to see anybody. I don't want to do anything. I lack motivation to live. This is how we're going to do this, because that's what we've always done. And then I'm going to get out of bed after 3 days and trudge through things. And then eventually I'll be okay again. I don't know. I came to a point where I'm like, it's not life. That's not life. I actually just did a post today about life is meant to be loved, not just lived. I don't want to just exist. I want to enjoy my life. We don't know how much time we have. Like, that's not what life is supposed to be. So that other path that you normally don't go down, you can go down it. You just have to choose to go down it. But why people don't do it, why people don't start therapy, why they don't try to heal, because it's scary. The unknown is scary. Even this other stuff that sucks, like the repeated cycles, like me marrying somebody that he treated me worse than my mother and stepfather all in one person. Or why did I get triggered and do the same thing, react the same way? Because I know it. It's familiar. And when you've been through trauma, you don't like surprises, and the unknown, you don't know what's out there. I always say healing feels like being a blind person with one of those sticks, like feeling your way, and you don't know if a snake is going to wrap around your ankle or if something's going to push you, if you're going to fall. You have no idea. That you have to take that risk, because nothing good comes without a little risk, so you have to take that risk for yourself and for your greater good, unless you really want to spend your life, which nobody would blame me or anybody else that's been through stuff, if you want to lay in bed and be depressed. But I did that. I did the meds. I did all the stuff. And I'm proud to say, like, now I can get triggered. And like I said, the other day I had a trigger and I was just like, I just felt ick for like a second and then I moved on.
Yes.
But a few years ago, I would have been in my walk-in closet in my bedroom in fetal position crying over. And the silly thing is, I couldn't even tell you what it was. I don't even remember what it was.
I get
But
that.
that's a good thing. So I'm patting myself on the back like, good job, girl. You've come a long way. That's a measure of healing. But I think you're always going to be on that journey. And you're going to have days where you're tired or you're sick, or we're women, we go through menopause. This perimenopause stuff is, but where you won't have the energy to always be so on point with the healing, where you're just going to say, forgive me, but F it. Like, I'm just going to lay in bed and cry for a few minutes and like just release it. But it's okay. Because in my childhood, I wasn't allowed to feel. If I cried, I was too sensitive. I was too emotional. Why did I have feelings? When I stood up for myself, I was defiant. I needed to shut up. I needed to just listen. And that just wasn't who I am, because I knew, like you say, your body, I was getting stomach aches and headaches constantly as a young girl. But I was told I was faking it to get attention.
Yes.
And so I dismissed it. And now here I am at 49 years old after all that childhood and then a marriage of more of that 25 years I was with my first husband. I ended up at the end of that with a rare lung syndrome that's similar to having COPD and fibromyalgia at the same time. And it's a result, a direct result of cortisol, the stress hormone, and living in fight or flight for decades. So you have to listen to your body. And if you want a better life, you have to be proactive and take the action for your physical health and your mental health to do the work. And it is work. It's you know, if you want abs, if you want a toned body, you got to go lift weights. It's the same with your mind. You have to do the work.
Don't you think a lot of people don't realize until they start the power that they have inside? Like, I think we do not realize the power of even just one little thought that shifts away. You know, you commented on a post that I wrote about being a novice. And I feel like this is related to that because, like, the path that you describe of the abuse and, you know, the shame and all of that is like well-trodden path, right? But the path of like being new to the idea of whatever it is feels just so foreign. And just feels like you're just not good at it. You don't even know what to think that will create a better outcome. And I feel like it's being willing to be like almost like distorted and uncomfortable because a new thought is foreign. You know, the 90,000 thoughts we think every day, 91% of those thoughts are the same thoughts we thought yesterday. So if you're programmed into that mindset, that you're worthless or whatever. And then the way to take maybe 9% of whatever that small percentage is and create new thoughts that sound like lies. And it's like being willing to lie to yourself, even though it's not a lie to yourself in a different direction can just start these little inkling where you start getting on that path. I didn't know I had so much power with my mind. Years ago, I could move a freaking mountain.
Now that I'm doing more speaking, that's what I've been calling myself is the power shifter. I am going to help you shift your idea of who holds the power in your mind because I love talking to people in the field of psychology and neuroscience because let's talk about the RAS, the reticular activating system.
Yes.
This is where we, you know, all this stuff about programming and rewiring and reframing, and this is where your life changes. And so for those who don't know, this is just, I am not a scientist by any means or a doctor, but simple thing. In your brain, you have this thing called the reticular activating system. They call it the RAS for short, RAS. So its job, its primary function is to take in all the sensory stimulation you get, your sight, sounds, you know, your environment, anything that you see, hear, taste, sense, smell, whatever, every day. And I mean, millions, tens of millions of things are coming at you every day. And out of that, they say about 24 of those stimuli will be filtered through into your, you know, real thought processes. You know how your brain, how that RAS picks those 24 things out of the tens of millions based on what you believe. So all of those years that I thought I'm a burden, I'm a bother, nobody will ever love me, I was only seeing, my brain was only filtering through all the things that reflected that back to me. It's like they were taking the evidence to support it.
Yes.
It's just like when I was in journalism school, it was like, okay, here's a story. You could go this angle or that angle. You can find evidence for both angles. You know,
yes.
Which one are you going to choose? Well, that's the thing. So yes, when I started healing, that was part of it. And I used to laugh. I used to laugh and make fun of people. I used to call it hoodoo voodoo when spiritual people would say, oh, do your affirmations and meditate and all that. And I'm making fun now because you know what? The key to changing your life, start with affirmations. Every time I started to think, oh, you know, stupid me, I shouldn't have, and oh, he doesn't love me, or, you know, nobody will ever like me, I shouldn't go to that party because nobody's going to talk to me. I had to actually look in the mirror to hear it out of my lips and say it to my face, no, You are
Mhm.
amazing. You are intelligent. You have so much to offer this world. It's kind of like Saturday Night Live. Remember that skit they used to do? Laugh at it.
Yes.
Like, I am wonderful.
Yes.
You know what? However you need to do it. Some people write it down.
Mhm.
Some people, I just would say it to my face because I needed to like see
Yes.
it being
Yes.
said out of my mouth. But again, it tricks your Raz because now your Raz is like, oh, we're going to believe that stuff now. We're going to believe people actually like you now.
Yes.
And you go out in the world and you're like making friends and people are coming to you and calling you. And you're like, what just happened here?
Yes.
Because you stopped believing that people didn't like you. You stopped believing that you didn't offer any value. You start believing. And I've had people say, oh, you're gaslighting yourself. I said, well, what does it matter to you? If I feel better and I'm more confident and I actually like myself, much more. I mean, I came from a time many, many times, even I hate to say a few years ago, 2 years ago, I was thinking again about taking my life. And here I am today saying, why? Thank God I didn't. Thank God I didn't because I think I'm pretty okay. I actually kind of like myself now.
Yes.
And I'm so okay that I can be in relationships with people. Even if my husband came to me today and I love him with all my heart, but if he said it's over, it's done, whatever, oh, I would cry my eyes out. I would be devastated, but I would be okay enough with myself to know that life will go on. I would say thank you for the memories. Thank you for the times, all the things we shared and move on. I'm not going to fight anymore for where I don't fit. I'm not going to fight anymore for things that don't serve me and don't align with my best interests and what my vision for my life is. We have to move in a different way if we want to improve our lives and not be that person that is thinking about taking their life or is depressed or anxious or whatever it is that we want to improve about ourselves.
Can I ask you to speak directly to a person, male or female, any age, who might be at this very moment considering suicide? And before you do it, I'm just going to preface this is that I had a reel that just went basically viral I just mentioned something about suicide, and all the comments, just one after another, of people describing feeling hopeless, no one loves them, and talking about dying. And I want to take your words and I'd like to, from this podcast, and find a way to put it on that stream so they could hear from you. What would you say to them? And, you could even just like start now and explain what you felt and show them the way out.
So I've been in a situation many, many times in my life where I didn't want to be here anymore. What I came to realize is it's not that I wanted to take my life. It's not that I didn't want to live. I just didn't want to live the life I was living.
Yeah.
I didn't want to hurt anymore. And that's all it was. I didn't want to hurt.
Yeah.
But the thing about that is that, when I think back of all the times that I felt like, and I spent most of my life thinking I was alone and that nobody was going to love me and that I didn't matter, to get to the point where I thought, why am I even here? But thankfully, I realized at one point that I had blinders on. The reason I felt alone was because my blinders were just focusing me on the few people that I wanted to see me.
Yes.
The people I wanted love and affection from. Mm-hmm. And some people might say the people that should give me love and affection, like my mother.
Right.
Like the man I was married to. And, it's very hard, but you have to take the blinders off, because when I finally took the blinders off, and let me tell you, I was 46 years old when a very dear friend, he's a missionary priest, I was having one of these moments and he held my hand and he said, "Dear, look around you." He said, "You have a husband who loves you. Your son absolutely loves you. Your grandma loves you. Why do you feel alone? Why don't you see that?" And that's what made me realize I had to take the blinders off. I didn't see it because I wasn't looking at them.
Yes.
I was looking at the people who were rejecting me and focusing on that. So when I could take some breaths and by the way, give myself permission to feel, because I was always told my feelings didn't matter, so I wasn't supposed to have them. My feelings made other people uncomfortable. So I couldn't have that. I would suffer consequences. So I gave myself permission to feel my feelings. And I let it, I'm a crier now. Menopause doesn't help, but I'm a crier. And it felt so good to release that pain, you have to move that energy and move that stuff through your body. And I got it out and I took the blinders off. You have to just think about literally taking the blinders off. And I thought, my gosh, what my husband has sacrificed to be with me, what my son and I have been through together, and look at us and where we are now. And gosh, just thinking how grateful I am for all the blessings in my life and everything around me. And, my grandma, despite being estranged by my mother, my stepfather, multiple sides from the family I've been exiled from for speaking my truth. My grandma stands by my side and supports me. And, we don't need an army of people behind us. We just need a few. But they're there. They're there. So to anybody who is thinking to take their life, let me tell you, you are here for a reason. You may not know what it is, and that's okay, but you have value. There is something you are here to do. There's somebody here that needs you to inspire them. You have work to do. So just breathe, take the blinders off, open your heart, because there are people who want you to be here. There are people who love you. There are people who are waiting for you to rise and to shine and be everything you were ever meant to be.
Yeah.
And that can't happen if you're not here.
Right.
So, and I'm also going to say I love you, because I believe that love is the key, loving ourselves, but sometimes we don't even like ourselves. And so we have to borrow other people's love for us. And I may not know whoever is hearing this, but I love you and I want you to be here. And there's nothing wrong with spreading that in this world. We have to start loving other people, because we're all human and we're just trying to get through this muck of life together.
Yes. And I'm going to just add to that. I feel the same way. I love you. And I believe that because you're here, you're meant to be here. And I also just, interestingly, when you're describing the blinders, right, it's on the piggyback of what we were just talking about, that the reticular activating system, that little filter, when somebody has a suicide mind, they do not see the people that love them. The pain eclipses any vision, any hearing. And I do want to say something to anyone, because quite a few people on this post said, no one does love me. Now, we don't know where these people are, and maybe their experience, like think about you as that little girl. Like, how could you even feel in that household by yourself that anyone loved you? It would not be possible. How could you're just trying to, how? So if there's anyone out there that feels like absolutely no one loves them, what I want to tell you is that we can't allow other people's decisions or the way that they act define our value. And I don't blame you for feeling that way, but it would really be such a tragedy for you not to give yourself a chance to, whatever it is, move out of any situation. I don't know what it is, but be able to start to lie to yourself and develop the belief that there will be the right people who love you. And I think it requires us just being willing to know that it's possible. Hey, guys, how are you? Isn't that amazing? This story that we're hearing on this show is great. I want to just give a shameless plug of my book. I would really want people to have a good look at my book and to understand what it really is. I used to be ashamed to plug my book, and then I realized, how is that right, to keep the information, the 30 years of experience that I have, the 8 years of education, the trauma that I grew out of and learned how to manage, and how to manage emotion, all the training I've had in neuroscience and quantum physics. How can I keep that from the public. So it's not, I used to think it was like something I should, be humble about, but being humble is silly when you're keeping things away from people that they need. So what I want to tell you about my book, and I hope that you do get it, because I think it will really help you. I've gotten a lot of tremendous feedback about my book, and that it's really, really of great value to a lot of people. And what it is, it's an interactive read, and there's inside of it, there's journal entries. So as I'm teaching and going through the book and teaching you how to create the life you want by understanding how you're wired, how your thoughts, feelings, how your words, how thoughts are things, and the neuroscience behind it, and how we are programmed from the time we're 0 to 7 years old to live a life of mediocrity or a life of poor design because of meaning that we attached to events when we were children that just became our programming. What I want to tell you is that there is a way out, and it's a simple way. It's very simple. I believe in the simplicity and the grace in healing, and that it doesn't have to be a big work. So I would love it if you'd get my book. It's a best-selling book on Amazon, and it's my first. And I encourage you to get it. It's called The Wake Up Call, an interactive read for building the life you want. I don't think you'll be disappointed. Thanks so much for being on the show, and let's get back to it.
May I ask if you could also, in the last days or whatever period of time it was when you were married and you were in that situation with a true narcissist and you were thinking you were going to lose your life. I remember the story, and I just want to know, because there's going to be people listening who are possibly there, right? They can see you now and your triumph and your continued triumph. How did you systematically remove yourself from that situation? And could you also just share any recommendations for someone who really feels like they just can't go, right? And they're afraid.
Yeah. One of the biggest recommendations that I make and something I talk about in that book is I had this epiphany. It was that life-changing moment, that deep, dark soul moment when just after I was diagnosed with the upper airway resistance syndrome. And, you think you're in your 40s and you have your, half your life at least left, if not a little bit more. And when you're facing mortality, whether it's from physical illness or a threat of somebody wanting you not to be here, you start searching your soul for some more meaning and some guidance. And in that moment, it just kind of came in my head. I was just laying in the basement on the couch because that's where I slept at that time. And I just remember asking myself, what do I want? Because nobody had ever asked me, what does Dana want? It was always dictated down to what I ate, what I wore. If he didn't like my lipstick, I had to go change my lipstick. It was silly. So I asked myself what I wanted. And the funny thing is that my answers, they were nearly immediate. Immediate. I had always wanted to work. I got a degree in journalism and I minored in psychology. I'd always wanted to write, and I'd always wanted to help children that had been in abusive situations. I wanted to be married. I just wanted to be married to somebody that maybe just liked me and didn't want me dead. It sounds funny, but minor details. I wanted to travel. I just like basic things. And, the interesting thing, this goes back to the programming. It goes back to the RAS. Once I had that vision in my head, it was strange because every day it was like that vision gave me a little hope. Yes. But that little bit of hope turned into, oh, well, I want to travel. Like, where would I want to travel to? So like, at night, instead of scrolling or whatever, I'd go on the internet and see like, oh, where can I visit in Italy? I've always wanted to go to Australia. I didn't know kangaroos were mean. I guess I'm not going to go see kangaroos, but like when you start like adding on and really visualizing and forming bigger ideas based on these little things that you're just entertaining a little bit, you have a vision. It becomes almost a goal, dare I say the word. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. When it's something that comes from your heart, from your soul, it's still in there. And so I challenge everybody, just ask what you want, because let me tell you something, and it's the most amazing thing. And I never realized how powerful we really are, because I spent most of my life powerless and helpless and just, flailing at the mercy of everybody else's decisions for me. From the moment I asked myself what I wanted and had that vision, that was at the end of 2019. By the end of 2020, a year after I asked myself that, I was divorced. He was out of the house. I had already, I'm not suggesting this for everybody, but I was already engaged to somebody I'd known for a long time. I knew what I wanted. And the thing is, I knew his family for like 20 years in my defense, and I knew him for a long time. But, it was like, and we were selling the house, and my son was graduating, like all these like life-changing things were happening, but I was happy. I was happy in a year. And within 2 years after that, I was married. I had published. Now I have 3 published books. I'm now speaking on stages. I had done all these, but you don't have to go and do like big things and be seen or whatever. I'm just making the point that I had gone from living in this podunk town where my ex I could not have any success or joy or happiness. I was not to have a job or a career. He had me cleaning houses with his friend's wife. So here I was, a Cinderella story, basically, where I go from scrubbing floors and toilets to now, I'll be speaking, at women's expos, and I'm in a summit next year in England, and just all these different things that I would have never in a million years thought that I would be qualified or that anyone would think to have me as part of. I wouldn't even think that that would be part of my life. So I think we really have to just go back to ourselves and dive deep. And I don't think you have to dive very deep, because I think anybody in a situation where you're restricted and controlled and contained, you know what's in your heart. You know what's there. You still want the same things you always wanted. And if you know you're not going to get them in that situation, well, you know the answer. But I do always say I'm not going to be that person that says get out, because if it's not safe for you to get out, if it's safer for you to stay or safer for your children or even the animals, I completely get that. But if there is somebody in an abusive situation, especially if there is violence involved, I'll give a little tidbit. Number 1, have your finances in order. One of the things that I did on my bank accounts, investment accounts, retirement, anything, any assets, make sure you designate a beneficiary, and make sure that maybe it's not the person you're married to, if that's the person that is doing you harm. I had everything switched to my son so that if anything happened to me, I at least knew that, until at least when he became of age for whatever assets, that he would have the money or, the house or whatever it was, and it would be up to his discretion what to do with it. I did not want any monies or anything going to my then husband or ex-husband, because I knew it would not be used in my son's best interest. And my main priority was making sure my son's life, if something happened to me, was maintained at least to the best that it could. The next thing is a little safe, a handheld, fireproof, waterproof safe. Literally, it's about the size of a nice purse. You can get it at Walmart for $50. Again, make sure it's fireproof and waterproof. Things happen, but it's a $50 safe. Put everything that's important in there: birth certificates, passports, any legal documents. Make sure you have like a list of all your bank accounts, passwords, like anything pertinent. I also got a very large jump drive and backed up everything on my computer, tax records, all the like photos, family photos, all that stuff, put it on the jump drive, kept it in the safe. Why? Because I call it a grab and go, especially if there's violence involved. If there is a moment that you have an opportunity, I don't want you to have to think. You grab your kid,
Yeah.
you grab your cat, whatever, grab the grab and go case and get get the heck out of there.
Mhm.
That way you do not have to go back. You don't need your stuff. You don't need your clothes. Let them have the car and the house and the whatever. But you do need certain legal documents and identifying documents like the birth certificates. I even went so far as to photocopy driver's license, all the insurance stuff, everything, and kept it in there or kept it on a jump drive so that there was no reason to return to that house.
Yeah.
I just think that was a really good thing. Just make sure it's hidden, make sure they don't know about it, make sure not to keep the key in it, find a good space for the key. And I let one person in my life, one person knew where the key was, just in case something happened to me. And that was a person that lived nowhere near me and that I trusted implicitly. But definitely just some ideas, because you have to do these things, unfortunately, in secret. I always say when you're dealing with a narcissist, a malignant one, unfortunately, you have to become like them in order to escape them. So you are going to have to be a little dishonest and a little manipulative, but it's for your better good till you get out.
Thank you so much for sharing that. These are such good practical tips. What I'm sure of this because you described it, but I'm diving in a little deeper. What I tell people a lot is that sometimes people in these bad situations, they just can't picture the jump from where I am today to actual freedom. Can't even imagine it. So I always say, especially if someone's terrified, is that it all begins inside. Like being awake and aware in the now without judging yourself. Just head, heart, feet, all in the same spot, and be able to begin the transformation internally, because they will never know that's happening. So as you're doing this internal transformation, you are getting stronger and you don't have to rush it. I mean, maybe there's an emergency and you do have to just leave. But the point is that a lot of people are afraid that they'll notice some change, but you can do it all inside. Would you agree? I'm sure you did that. Yeah, because you described it.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah. And that, it's funny because I always said, nobody can keep a secret like I can. We all have these things that we say, oh, I'm not supposed to tell, but so don't tell anybody. If you don't want somebody to know something, you don't say anything.
Mhm.
My son didn't know he still doesn't know half. He didn't even know that we were divorced until after the divorce. And I told him, I learned very, very fast to keep everything very close to my heart. Nobody needs to know. Nobody needs to know. And
Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
Just in regard to not my experience or even just working with couples when there is a true narcissist, it really wouldn't matter what data or information you give them. It will be used in a way like it will incriminate you.
Oh,
Yeah.
100%.
So it's like you just don't share anything, right?
Literally. I
Mhm.
mean, when people ask questions, even people I don't know anymore, I until I can trust somebody and know that, they have good intentions, even just basic questions, they're collecting information to be able to use against you. And that is how narcissists operate. And everything will be twisted. You could be, you could be the Holy Virgin Mother Mary, and they will somehow make you evil. They will.
Yeah.
They're very creative. They're very
Yeah.
crafty. But yeah, you do have to be careful. So just keep stuff close to your heart. They don't need to know what you're doing, why you're doing it, any of that stuff, unless it's something you're obligated to tell them. I'm not saying be completely secretive, but I think, when you're in those circumstances, I think that people forget that, that unease you might feel when you're in a situation or in a conversation with somebody, or, like something in your gut is telling you something's not right. Listen to that, or even straight up anxiety. People think anxiety is bad. Not always. That's just like an inner smoke detector saying, danger, Will Robinson, danger, with the coily arms, waving around.
I love the reference. You know what? But I'm sure you've heard this a million times, but some people may have not. The abnormal becomes normal. So it's like the frog in the boiling water. If you take a frog, unfortunately, and you put a frog in water that's just cool, and then you put it on the stove on low, It will stay in there. Even if you try to take it out, it will fight to stay in there until it boils to death. And that I kind of look at that as the life of someone who's in a home with a narcissist, a seriously, a malignant narcissist. A lot of times I think people who are in bad situations, when they hear, they're like, oh, that happened to me. Like these similar little touch points that make you say, it makes you understand that, wow, I am in this situation. Because wouldn't you think, I'm not sure if you think this, but at some point, maybe earlier on or midstream, that I know that narcissists, I know at least some that I have worked with women, they go to great lengths to prove to everyone that the woman's crazy. It's the same thing they do to the children, mentally ill. Yes, she suffers from this. I don't know why she says this. She's so paranoid. She has so much anxiety. And like they're the hero of the situation.
Yeah.
I've had so many try to do that with me. I'm going to give one little, so like there's little stories, little things they do. I'm going to say like a little one, and then just as just an example. So like a situation where a woman comes home to the house, the heat is off, it's winter, all the lights are out, and all of her things are moved out of the bedroom and the bedroom door is locked. And she's terrified, but she doesn't know what to do, and it's eerie. And then she finds out later that the reason that was done that way was to make her understand how dark and cold she was to live with. So that is an example of something that a narcissist might do. Would you agree?
100%.
Yeah.
I would say it's like playing games, except on an adult level. When we're in high school, it's like, oh, he broke up with me, so I'm going to make him jealous by going and flirting with this guy. To me, that's playing games. It's silly, petty stuff. But when you're in a situation with a narcissist, the stakes are so much higher, and the game levels up big time. And it becomes one, it's actually funny. In my first book about that relationship, that first marriage, I actually said at one point, I was being forced to play a game I never asked to be playing.
That's it.
And that's what you have to do. It's the only way to survive. But you do everything means something. They do everything with purpose and with intention. Nothing is ever the accident or the misunderstanding that they make it seem to be. It is very intentional, and it is intentionally done to make you feel a certain way. But the crazy thing, honestly, I laugh sometimes because I have been called crazy so many times in my life, and I love how my mother and stepfather institutionalized me, because to this day, they don't even we have no contact, haven't for years. And I still hear that they're telling people that I'm emotionally unstable and I'm unhinged and I'm bipolar, and like, wow. I mean, but people believe them because that's followed with, oh, when she was 16, we had to institutionalize her.
It's a setup.
They have the evidence.
Yeah. Are there like some key moments or experiences, and it doesn't have to be too personal if you're not comfortable, but something that maybe people who hear it would then say, and they might say, oh, the person I'm calling a narcissist, they're not that. Or for the person who is really, Stockholm syndrome, like narcissists don't get into relationships, they take hostages, right? So,
yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like, how would you speak to, what touch points would you say would resonate with someone who is actually a hostage but doesn't know it, like the frog in the boiling water?
That's a tough one. The thing about, because that's a total truth there. The hostage reference, as well as the frog in boiling water, because that's my mother, is the frog in boiling water. I know she sees it, but she chooses to stay in it.
Yeah.
The thing about that I guess I need to speak on is that I feel like, so the narcissists, they will lure you in, almost like get you stuck in their web of lies. And
how do they do that? How did that happen to you?
we call that the love bombing. They know how to get you. My mistake was the first time that I gave my ex any attention. We were just talking and getting to know each other, and it's like every time I was saying something, oh yeah, me too, me too. I'm that too. I have that problem in my family too. And I was like, oh my gosh, he gets me. He gets me in a way nobody else does. And he even said that. And I like, oh, it'll be two of us against the world and forever. And all these things that you tell that to a girl who came out of a home where she wasn't even wanted and was mistreated to a great extent her whole life. That was like music to my ears. Is it the Pied Piper or whatever that played the magic flute and they just came and followed it? That's literally what it is. They're playing the pipe. They know how to play you. They know because they've collected that information. You're having a conversation. They're putting these things in the little files in their mind like, oh, okay, that's what's going to get her. That's how I'm going to lure her in. And this is how I'm going to keep her. But once they have you, once you're stuck in their web, that's when they start doing these, I call it a push and pull or a love and hate. They love you like nobody has ever loved you. And they'll tell you that nobody will ever love you the way they do. But then they will do these just atrocious things that make you question, like, what's going on here? Like, I thought this guy, but then you excuse it. It's like, oh, he had a bad day at work, or he was just not, frustrated about something not going his way, whatever it is. So then you excuse it. But then I always say it's like there's this, you have a boundary, even if it was very loose and out there like mine, where there's always a boundary. But every time something would happen, it was just a little bit worse than the last time. So
that's what I was going to ask
it.
you. Did you see the progression that
yeah,
it's like you're being desensitized, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the thing. You feel the ick, but you're like, not enough to, I always say there's a deal breaker in a relationship. You ask most women, they're going to be like, oh, if he cheats on me, well, let me tell you, if he cheats on you, he cheated before we were married, after we were married. By the end, I didn't even ask where he was the last 2 nights or who he was with. I was just glad it wasn't me. But you get to the point where, yes, you are desensitized because like the first thing that happened, let's put it this way. 1995, first thing that happened, and it was only 3 weeks after I met him, he got very angry and tore up the Christmas presents and threw in an aggressive manner a compact disc towards my head, and I ducked to avoid it. By the end of 25 years, we had gone from throwing compact discs to swinging crowbars at my head and bringing guns and knives into the situation and telling people he was planning to kill me. So yes, there is a progression because they can't come, he wasn't going to start waving guns and stuff around me after 3 weeks. He had to let it come in a little bit at a time. The crowbar happened somewhere in the middle. And like I said, by the end, after the divorce, there were guns and knives and death threats and all this other stuff. So yes, it is a progression, but that progression, absolutely, that's what makes it so insidious because you feel it. It's like, ugh, that doesn't feel good. I don't like that. But then you're like, oh, but is that worth, my son not having both his parents and, us having to move out and all the stuff of dismantling a life? And is it worth the consequences that this very violent and angry person is going to, inflict on me if I choose not to be with him? But then they always come back with the I'm sorry. We call this the future faking the promises. I would get love letters and oh, that he would caress my cheek and he's so sorry that he hurt me. And I did believe him. I wanted to. I had to. I don't think anybody, no matter what happens in a marriage, I don't believe that anybody really wants to give up that easily. You want to give them chances. You want to try. But
it's so compelling to feel love like that, especially if you haven't had it, and what's interesting, and I know you know this, but like, here's the abuse, and now the return is this, stroking your cheek, which you never got, like an apology when you were a little girl. It's almost like that is like such, obviously faulty medicine, but it's medicine to this little girl who now it's reenacted, but with love afterwards or apologies afterwards, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, it goes back to what do you believe? He was telling me he loved me, and he was acting like he loved me sometimes.
Yeah.
Was it real? I don't know.
Yeah.
But the other stuff, when it started affecting my health and I had to kind of decide like, okay, my organ systems were shutting down. I was down to 93 skeletal pounds. It was scaring people how I was withering away. And I want people to understand, I went from coaching the cross country team at the school, jogging 5 miles a day, very active, to I had an oxygen machine in a backpack every day just to breathe, to keep my oxygen hopefully somewhere just above what the COVID level was. And sometimes it would drop below that. And it's a very scary thing to, like I said, to face mortality at such a young age when you think you have not even lived half your life.
Yes.
And is this worth it? Is all this misery and this suffering when I know I am not happy and this is not the life I ever thought I would be living? And this wasn't even a life that felt like it was mine. It was the life I had been told to live, the life that had been dictated to me. And I think sometimes you have to be at that deal breaker moment to say, okay, this is the deal breaker. It's not all the women he slept with. It's not all the physical threat and the abuse and all the stuff. It's that now I am literally dying. I'm physically dying inside as a result of my emotional distress.
You
and
knew
is
that?
this man worth it?
Did you know at that point? It sounds like you did. Did you know? Could you identify that it was from being in this relationship, your illness?
I knew it was because I had gone in about a year and a half time when I knew something was clearly wrong with my body physically. I thought I had a disease or something, which obviously the lung syndrome is an issue, but I was sent to every specialist, everyone. And I can't tell you, I think I had 3 doctors solidly say whatever is wrong is being triggered by stress. And whatever is so stressful in your life needs to go. And every time they would say that, I immediately thought of him. Obviously.
Yes.
Obviously.
Think about this for a minute. I'm just curious what you would think. Is that I do think it's possible for someone to be in such denial, like at that point, like you were not. You saw and you had awareness, which is saved you. Truth saves you, right?
Mhm.
But like there are people, women or whatever, who just say, yeah, I'm just sick. And then they'll do it all the way to the grave and they're so conditioned to not call out what's the truth of what's really happening, right? I'm sure that's right. Wouldn't you say there's a lot of, like when you say 1 in 3 die, every 10 minutes someone dies.
Every 10 minutes. Yeah.
Yes. Either by the hands of them or just maybe the stress, right?
Exactly. And if you knew how many women I have met since I've been speaking out that have autoimmune diseases, very common because of having lived in fight or flight mode for so long. Chronic stress is what the doctors call it. Yet if you go to a doctor because of physical ailments, they just want to throw a pill at you. Oh, you have migraines, here's a migraine pill. Oh, you're sad, whatever, here's an antidepressant, or here's an anti-anxiety. Oh, you don't feel good, you just eat some. I had one doctor that's like, just eat some ham and gain some weight. I'm like, oh, if it were that easy, ham is life, I guess. But, this was not for me at that time. It was something needed to go. But yeah, I think that we all have something in us that, we know. We just don't want to admit a lot of things. And I think that this is really important to address because this kind of brings everything we've been talking about, kind of full circle. The thing about being in a relationship with a narcissist, they will gaslight you to no end and negate everything you say, and you don't know anything. You learn, unfortunately, to distrust yourself.
Yes.
Sorry, my thing was going off. But you learn not to trust yourself because you can't, because you get confused. you don't know what's what anymore because you're thinking one thing, they're saying another. If you confront them, oh, it was just a joke. You misperceived it. You misunderstood. I didn't say that at all. That's not how it happened. It creates complete confusion. That is why I started taking notes. I started keeping text messages, printing emails. I stopped even really talking to him altogether so he could only communicate with me electronically because I needed to know. It's almost like I was collecting evidence that I wasn't crazy, that I was seeing and understanding things the way that I was seeing and understanding them. But the key to undoing all that, undoing that programming when you get out or as you're getting out, when you have this awakening moment that this is not what you thought it was, you realize that it's not that you can't trust them, it's that you don't trust yourself. Because a big part of my healing has been learning to trust myself. And I say this because I was that person that was like, oh no, I don't trust anybody. I can't love anyone ever again. And I don't want to do this. I don't want to be around people. Isolate the whole thing. It's not that you don't trust yourself. It's not that you shouldn't ever love somebody again. It's that you don't trust yourself to make a good decision, to see the world as you really see it, or to trust that people are who they say they are. Are there shady, sketchy people out there? Yes. There are narcissists, there are liars, there are cheats, there are frauds. But if you trust yourself and use discernment and trust that discernment, you'll be okay. Are you always going to be 100%? No, you're going to be wrong. Sometimes you're going to misjudge, and that's okay. You're human. We all are. But nobody was ever meant to live alone and isolated. As humans, our basic need is for connection. And so to take that away from ourselves because we don't trust ourselves because somebody made us not trust ourselves, that to me is like the worst thing ever. I just, that makes me so sad because I think that when you can open your heart and understand that, okay, I'm going to start, this is what I'm going to say. I remember when I was like 9, 10 years old, we'd go to the community pool in the summertime. And I remember the first time I had the nerve to go up the ladder to the high dive. Ooh, that was scary. And I'm terrified of heights. I didn't really swim very well. And I was terrified about being up there. And I remember looking down like, oh my God, I can't do this. Am I going to be okay? I'm going to die. I'm going to hit the bottom. My head's going to break open. I'm going to bleed everywhere. Like, I'm not going to survive this. What am I doing? All the fear, right? Yeah. And I just remember taking a deep breath and closing my eyes and just hurling myself off that high dive. And you know what? I remember hitting the water and it hard.
Yes. I still won't do that.
What happened underwater, but I came up to the surface and I just remember when I broke the surface and taking that big breath of air and like, I felt excited and I felt so proud of myself and I had all this adrenaline rushing through me. I almost felt invincible and all this stuff. You kind of just have to go at it like that. You have to go back up on the high dive and just take a deep breath and know that there's a lifeguard there. There's people all around you. Even if they don't know you, they're not going to let you not survive this. Mm-hmm. You are going to be okay. You are going to be okay. So whatever it is you're scared of, just know most of us humans don't want to see other people suffer. We're going to help you get there. We're going to guide you along the way. We're going to do our best. Even if I didn't know how to swim, and there was a time that I did see a little girl go under and nobody else saw her go under the water and I didn't know how to swim, but I went down and got her. I got her back up and the mother thanked me. And it makes me sad that what would have happened if I hadn't seen her. But that's the thing. We're not going to let anybody fall or falter.
Yes.
We can all take the risk, jump off. Is there risk in opening your heart to somebody else romantically after something like this? Absolutely. But what if you find the person? What if you find happiness you never thought you could have? What if you find a healthy relationship? What if you just go on dates and don't force yourself to commit to anybody? Just enjoy meeting new people and having nice meals. It's okay. You can have fun. You don't have to find the one, right? Just have fun. Live your life and enjoy your life because you deserve to.
You know, I'll tell you, I feel like such a powerful thing that you're saying. I feel like it's everything. The thing about trusting ourselves. Because
Yeah.
I have this silly like joke I say that without me, I have nothing. But it's like I never really believed it until much later in life that the real problem in any area of my life was a lack of trust of myself.
Yeah.
And when you have yourself in your corner, it doesn't matter what situation you're in. Like, even if you end up, let's say, you know, recreating an old scenario, if you can trust yourself to say that you'll say no to that again, and you have to build that up. You have to become the person that you would trust. And it's amazing, like, even if you make a mistake or you're in a bad situation and there's no one there, but if you have you and you develop yourself to be a you that's healthy and emotionally stable, that's the important. I just think it's so powerful. I also want to, I never want to interrupt you because I love everything you say so much. There was one thing I do so much. You're so insightful and just bright, beautiful. The one thing you said that somebody said, well, aren't you gaslighting yourself, when you're saying these affirmations? And what I thought when you said that is that I feel like when I'm saying things like that, like I am Alison, I am courageous, confident, consistent, and whatever. When I say those things, it's a command. I'm directing my life to be that, which is interesting. Instead of like trying to convince myself, no, I'm directing this, right?
I love that. Yeah. That's an amazing perspective. I love that. See, I love that I learned so many things from you, but it's true because like when I use that, even just in daily life, I talk to myself, but
Yes.
it'll be like if I'm scared and,
Yeah.
like, oh, I really don't know what I'm doing. I'm nervous. I'm going to mess it up. I will literally stop myself and say out loud, well, I'm learning and that's okay. I might make a mistake, but I'm going to learn from that mistake. Like you just have to kind of rework it. I remember being in a situation where, there was, I invited some people and I said there to something and I said it was a cash bar. But then when I went to pay mine and my husband's tab at the end of the night, the bartender said, oh, your husband had everybody put their drinks on your tab. And I'm like, oh, like, and then I'm like, I literally stood there and looked up and said, thank you, Lord, for having for giving me a generous and gracious husband. He just looked at me and she was like, thinking I'm a little nuts. I'm like, this is what I need to do to keep my perspective right, because my husband is a loving and amazing man and he's just trying to be nice. It's not what I intended, but that's okay. We love that he's amazing and nice, but it is all about just kind of reminding yourself, looking at the more positive aspect, because how easily we go down that I'm stupid, I'm worthless, I can't do this, I shouldn't, that's all wrong. But gosh, when you're surrounded by, I look at it as soil, if you put toxic stuff on your flower bed in your garden, all those flowers are going to die. And instead, if you take care of them and pull the weeds and give them nourishment and sunshine and rain, oh, they bloom and they're colorful and they're beautiful. They're in all their glory. And so I often think of myself as a flower. Like I look at the people I surround myself with, like, am I surrounded by weeds? Am I surrounded by toxic things, like ground zero that's going to kill all the weeds or whatever? Or am I surrounded by other flowers that are blooming and growing and taking their space, but also letting me have some of the nourishment and letting me have some sunshine and some rain? Because we can all be those glorious flowers. We don't have to be, but it's who you choose to surround yourself with that's going to help you reflect that to you until you believe it about yourself.
Yeah, I love that analogy. I use the garden analogy a lot, but the way that you just put that is just really, it's beautiful. It's really cool. I know that whoever's listening to this, even if they're in the darkest situation, they've gotten light. I just know that. The different things that you've experienced, and when you return to that older place, sometimes when there's stress in our lives, we return to like old programming. Do you notice that too?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I would love for you to tell everyone, everything's going to be in the show notes, but I would love for you to tell everyone the names of your books and point people in the right direction. Because each book, obviously, I think they're all great to have. But if somebody's in a specific situation where maybe they can only get one book or something, like, yeah. Well, who should get what book?
Okay, so the first book is Gasping for Air, The Stranglehold of Narcissistic Abuse. That was only supposed to be the only book I ever wrote, but that's the book about my first marriage. It covers the entire 25-year relationship plus a little bit of the aftermath. That is for anybody who's been or is in a toxic relationship. Just be aware that, again, the word narcissistic abuse is in the title, so don't keep it on your coffee table if you're still in the situation. It's on Audible. It also is in ebook format. You can get it anywhere books are sold, or go to my website, sdiaz.com. Links for all the books are there. The second book is Choking on Shame, The Scapegoat Child in a Narcissistic Family. These are for people that, well, it's a good, I call it the prequel to Gasping for Air, because the question after Gasping for Air was, how does somebody end up in a relationship like this? And for me, the answer was very easy. I was basically groomed, and served on a silver platter to another narcissist. But this is for anybody that is looking for some insight on what it looks like on the outside and on the inside, to be the child, the powerless to do anything about the situation. And I go very deep in my books, by the way. I want people to understand choking on shame. I've had a little struggle with, because most readers that are loyal to me have said they can't get past the third or fourth chapter because it's very intense. And I feel bad, because I read A Child Called It, and I'm like, that kid went through a lot more than I did. Much worse, much more severe, but I had trouble reading that. So I thought mine, but it's that thing again where you're desensitized. I thought like, oh, what's the big deal? Keep reading. But a lot of people have trouble with it.
Yes.
And I've had people that have had difficult childhoods that it's just very triggering and they're not ready. And that I understand, because even I couldn't read it anymore or look at it. So there are errors, I admit, in the book, grammatical and whatever, because I couldn't. I'm fortunately in a place where I can now, but that's the childhood book. The third book is what I call the sequel. We kind of went out of order, like Star Wars, but the third book is called Rising from the Ashes, Breaking the Cycle of Narcissistic Abuse. And I'm Catholic, so there's two parts to the book. The first one is called The Narcissistic Apocalypse, because we bring in basically everything comes full circle from the first two books. My mother and stepfather re-enter with more issues. My ex-husband re-enters with more issues. And I have just been divorced. I'm trying to move on. I'm trying to get remarried. A friend of 16 years turns out to be another narcissist. And so you have the friendship aspect, and she literally tried to stop my wedding in a very severe and life-altering way. And the wedding still happens. But there's a lot of buts. So the second part of that book is called Revelations. And that's where I kind of start putting together everything from my life. And it's funny that the very last chapter of that book, it all comes back to my mother. It all came back to my mother and her initial rejection of me, and how I began to deal with that little monster in my head. So it's a much lighter book than the other two, but yeah, they all kind of offer something. But most people I always say, read Gasping for Air first, because if nothing else, it's the fan favorite. It was the best-selling book, #1 new release. Even I recently reread it, and I was like, oh, that's a good book. Like, that, even realizing like that was my life. I was like, I couldn't stop reading it. It was like it just grabs you and keeps you in there. I'm like, oh wait, that was my life.
You're so funny. That's really cool. And I love your titles. You have the best titles. Very, very good titles. Yes.
Thank you. The funny thing is, Gasping for Air, I had notebook pages, several of names for the book, and the publisher's like, I don't like any of them. I don't like any of them. And I'm like, you know what? I named my cat Kitty. You name the book. And so somebody at the publisher's office came up with the name Gasping for Air. But the other two were all me because I wanted to have a theme and kind of connect them stuff.
I
So I'll
see.
take
Yeah,
credit for
great.
two.
Yeah. Okay. I'll give you credit for all three for knowing you couldn't do it. That's it. So I feel like I had like 30 other questions, but I know I want to be respectful of your time. And we were supposed to do this live, but we had some technical glitches. So I am going to put this like live and raw all over the place. I do ask of listeners, if you know someone who would benefit from this, would you please share it? And, if you know even like a teenager who feels like the scapegoat in a family, or if you notice a family where they're always talking about a child in this way, just keep your eyes open, because it really is, these things shouldn't be happening on our watch. It's not just, there's the people in the grips of something like this are really prisoners. And also I do ask that please don't use that word lightly. It's a serious word to be used, and it makes people who are prisoners in danger. So the other thing I would like to ask is that could you please like, subscribe, follow Dana? Would you do that, please? Dana S. Diaz. Dana S. Diaz. Wait a minute. .com?
.com.
That's it. It's too simple for me to even remember. But this is all going to be in the show notes. But I also ask, please, if you would, the only way that I want to go viral is if whoever watches this video, that it helps to change your life. And anyone else that you give it to someone who, not just anyone, just not loosely, people who it would really make a difference. It's the only reason I do this podcast. I do not monetize it. And I want it to be something that changes lives, that makes a difference on this earth. And I need you to partner with me to do that. And I could use some more subscribers on YouTube. For God's sakes, this is a top 3% podcast globally. And I have like 626 subscribers. People, I need your help. Okay. So, Dana, what would you like to say? Any closing important things, or also any other way that they could find you?
I would just say go to the website, danasdiaz.com. Links to all my socials are on there. You can even email me directly from the website. But I agree, just spread the word. If it doesn't relate to you, I promise you know somebody that this relates to. Share these resources with them. Share your podcast. Share this, program. Just reach out, because there's too many things that are happening right under our nose that end very tragically sometimes, and people don't need to suffer one more day if they don't have to. If you could reach out and lend a helping hand and just make them feel seen, because even just that little thing, just squeezing their hand once, when you see them, or just letting them know that you see them and you're there for them, whatever they need, that can make all the difference in the world. So just please open your eyes, be aware, and err on the side of caution.
Yeah.
That's all you need to do.
That's what I do. I very often, I just notice in public places, I'll notice like just a woman, you could see it's like almost like death in her eyes,
Mm-hmm.
and then you see her with like a confident male, and she seems like just mousy, just not so insecure. And I'm like, there's something wrong,
Yeah.
I saw an elderly woman sitting in, I don't even remember where I was, and she had, it was in Starbucks. She had a big black and blue on her eye. I was thinking, I was just dying to talk to her. I did talk to her, but I didn't ask her, like, are you all right? How'd you get hurt? But I mean, I feel like asking someone directly, maybe somebody would be insulted, but maybe you'd be helping. Maybe you'd free somebody. I'm not sure. I mean, I just extended this podcast. But
That's okay. And I'm going to extend it one more minute, because I had a black eye once, and after 3 weeks, I mean, it turns green and then yellow. I finally just said to somebody I worked with, I said, I have been to family barbecues. I have been at work. I've been in public. Obviously, I tried to cover it with makeup, but it was very obvious. I said, nobody has said anything. Not one soul, not one, not even my kid. I said, why? And she said to me, well, we all know he probably did it.
you know what?
And I didn't know how to respond to that.
Would you have wanted them to say something?
Yes.
Yeah. You know, it reminds me of the Kevin Hines story. He was on my podcast. He jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge and lived. He did not, and he can still run, jump, and, stand.
Wow.
Yes, but he tells what it's like to have decided to die by suicide and the moments after that. But one of the things he says prior to jumping off is that he was sobbing and crying on that bridge. And there were people everywhere taking pictures. He was on a bus that got him there. And the bus driver saw him sobbing and crying. He was a young man, 19 years old. No one talked to him. No one asked him. And the bus driver said, "Buddy, you got to get off." And then a woman, while he was on the bridge, said, "Oh, hi." She looked at him and she started walking over to him. And he was like, "Oh, thank God somebody sees me. I don't have to do this." And she took off her sunglasses. She handed him a camera and asked him to take a picture of her at the bridge. And then he was like, "You know what?" And he was like hopeful that someone saw him and he jumped off. Isn't that crazy? So it's like people, even though the shame is just dripping off of them, when somebody gets to that desperate point, they may not even care. But if you can see them, you can stop something. You disrupt the trauma and the pain somehow by extending love, so.
Yeah. I'm a big believer in hugs, even to strangers.
Yeah.
I don't think people realize that just even somebody holding you or you holding them helps their nervous system regulate and brings them back, as I like to think. But, we don't have to have all the answers, but we can give somebody a hug. We can offer that kindness.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Err on the side of love.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. I adore you. I want to thank you so much for just who you are. I'm so grateful to know you. This is not The Last of Us.
No, it's not. And I have always felt that connection with you, and I love
Yeah.
our conversation. So we will do this again, absolutely, anytime, any place. You just tell me when.
And you know what? I just want to say to people, if you want us to do a live, send us a bunch of questions.
Yeah.
We'll look at the questions and we'll come on live and Dana will answer them. You have questions for either one of us and we will do it. Okay? And who
That's
knows?
amazing.
We'll speak on a couple of stages together.
I love it.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's make our own event.
Yeah, we should actually.
Yeah, I'll do that. It's a wrap. Guys, thank you so much for listening to the show. I just want to say to you that we are all together a part of the Mission Awake, a mission that's going to stop the mediocrity that's plaguing all of us. So if you got something here today, I ask that you would be a part of this mission and you'd share it with whoever you can. Take a screenshot of the show and share it on your Instagram. If you are looking for me, you can find me on social media platform Instagram, Alison Answers, or Lager Counseling Services. And give us a review and subscribe if you could to YouTube, Alison Answers. That's where you're going to get a lot of content. I drop stuff every day, goofy stuff, all different kinds of stuff. 5-minute videos that just get you moving in your day. Have a great week. See you next time.